we'll talk about some of these Penn State schemes and what we're going to expect both in the Michigan game, but also take a step back and talk some Iowa games with Jason Lord of 1450 ESPN Radio and Between the Lines podcast, good friend of our show here. Jason, welcome onto the show tonight. And wow, that was quite an interesting football game on Saturday at Beaver Stadium.
Very interesting football game on Saturday. Kind of not necessarily a tale of two halves, but a tale of almost what it felt like was two teams initially. Obviously, Penn State got off to that slow start, and then really they don't turn it over down the stretch there, was ready to put Iowa away by 17 points. So it was really a tale of two very different teams from the first quarter and late third, early fourth quarter.
You're exactly right about that, and it's a Penn State team that struggled with putting together 60 minutes of football. And we actually talked with your co-host, Brian Tripp, a couple weeks ago, and we got into whether is it truly just a fourth quarter thing, and the last couple weeks would say yes, or is it just a full 60-minute thing, no matter when that lull will happen. Against App State, it happened late first half and into the third quarter. We've seen them struggle early on at times, like against Iowa, and then, of course, right at the end of the game. What do you think it is about this particular team and an inability to play 60 minutes of football consistently?
It is a full 60-minute thing, first of all, I think. It's not necessarily just the fourth quarter. A lot of it is, look, the defense is still a lot of young guys, even though they're playing very well. It's younger guys that aren't necessarily in that situation initially, and that plays a role, no question about it. And a lot of it is just, it took a little bit of time for Trace to really trust other wide receivers not named Juwan Johnson and KJ Hamler for much of the year. So I think you combine both of those, that's going to, in turn, cause a team to really make a few mistakes and not be able to close games, but also not be able to put that complete game together. You look at the Ohio State game. You take that early lead, then second half it dwindles back and forth. Michigan State, obviously, the heartbreaker where you couldn't close out. And Iowa, it wasn't necessarily a case of not closing the game. It was a case of just not consistently putting together a complete game. You talked about the start in the first quarter, and then down the stretch, had to have a Nick Scott interception.
Hey, Jason. Tyler Galhouse here. Staying on the defensive side of the ball, I think the Penn State defense has done actually a very good job this season in their bigger matchups against Ohio State, Michigan State, and Iowa. However, I think they've struggled a little bit in the Indiana game and even Illinois and Appalachian State, who just was in the top 25 last week, no longer is. The common theme I'm seeing is it seems like the defense gets up for these bigger games. What do you expect to see Saturday in Ann Arbor, and how does this defense match up to the Michigan offense?
Defense, I think, matches up pretty well against the Michigan offense, but that Michigan offense just brings a lot of experience, brings a heck of a wide receiver and Peoples-Jones, and a tight end with Gentry, too. And then Higdon's that guy that's not necessarily going to be a first-team All-American, but he's a guy that can beat you. So I think they match up well. I think the problem I see most with the defense is between the tackles. I think they're fine at defensive end. I think he clearly showed that. I think he clearly showed that last 2 weeks. But between the tackles is where they give up a lot of yards on the ground, and I think that's a concern for me, and that's a concern when you're facing a guy like Higdon. You're facing a mobile quarterback like Patterson. Even may see McCaffrey in there once or twice. So the mobility is a concern because of between the tackles, what Penn State has not really been able to do. Indiana, you're absolutely right, just really gashed Penn State on the ground. And the other worry is the screen passes. I think we're still seeing Penn State not necessarily defend that, and Michigan does it well.
Jason Lord on with us here on the Nittany Lions Sports Report. Jason, let's talk about this defense a little bit more. You say in between the tackles. Let's take a look at the next level, and that's the linebacking core. We're seeing more and more kind of delta or separation of snaps between the first stringers and the second stringers, and those second stringers are almost entirely encompassed by freshmen. You're seeing Micah Parsons take snaps from Koa Farmer. You're seeing Ellis Brooks take more snaps in a position where I think if you asked me or Tyler before the year, we might have said Jesse Luketa would have been the one to step up and take some snaps from Jan Johnson. How do you think that affects them going into the last 4 weeks of the season?
It's going to affect them in terms of experience. I think Micah Parsons especially is a guy that continues to learn and grow. And look, he came in from the high school level as much of an athletic player as really I ever saw it at the high school level, but coming into college, he had to learn that new position, had to learn that linebacker position, and you're seeing him learn it more and more each week. And you're seeing the more experienced guys struggle at times. You mentioned Koa Farmer, and that's one right there, but he's had his inconsistencies, and what I see really is the younger guys starting to take over and claim the positions, but James Franklin is still going to rotate guys out. He's shown that really throughout the year. He wants guys to be fresh down the stretch. You really saw it in those first 4 and 5 games.
Once again, Jason Lord on with us here on the Nittany Lions Sports Report. Jason, we just got done with the college football playoff show literally minutes before we came on air here, and we saw that Penn State came in at number 14, Ohio State at 10, and the Michigan Wolverines, who Penn State goes on the road to play this weekend, at number 5. First question, did anything surprise you about Penn State specifically? And then second, did anything surprise you about the rankings in general and the fabric of the Big Ten within it?
Big Ten-wise, no. Nothing really surprised me in terms of the rankings. Penn State earned that number 14 ranking with the win on Saturday. I thought they needed not necessarily that signature win, but the win that's going to catch a few eyes, and I thought Iowa did that. The App State win took a little bit of a back seat the way the Mountaineers played last week, so I think they needed that game that was going to catch a few eyes. You beat the team that was in the driver's seat in the Big Ten West in Iowa, so I feel like they've earned that number 14 ranking. Ohio State, look, winning against Penn State on the road in the whiteout in a very tough environment, I think that clearly earns the number 10 ranking. In Michigan, they call it the revenge tour, whatever they call it. Yeah, they have had some impressive victories. I think they've learned a lot, and they've gotten exponentially better between week 1 against Notre Dame and the Michigan team that you see now. So Big Ten-wise, I'm not really overly surprised. And I think from the top 4, I'm not really surprised either. I think LSU, be it they have a loss, I think they've earned that number 4 ranking. Obviously, that could change this week. They're clearly facing the best team in the country in Alabama. I think when you look at the rankings, it's Alabama number 1. They're on the top of a mountain, and at best, everybody else is about a third of the way up that mountain. I think Alabama is just that good this year. Nick Saban has done a heck of a job there. This may very well be his best team. So they are clearly the best team, and LSU this week. So Michigan can very easily, by beating Penn State, creep into that number 4 spot.
Speaking of Michigan, how do you expect, Jason, Penn State's offense to attack Michigan's stellar defense? I mean, this is one of the best defenses in the country, one of the best coached defenses in the country. I believe they're going to be without Rashawn Gary, their superstar defensive end, who hasn't played a whole lot of football this year, which is good news for Penn State. But there's no short of talent or experience on that defensive side of the ball. Penn State had great success, obviously, last year at home, putting up a ton of points on Michigan. And I know that Michigan, that still bothers them to this day that they got totally embarrassed like that. So how do you expect Penn State to attack Michigan's defense this year, especially with the target now on Penn State's back?
Well, it starts with Trace McSorley. I think you obviously have got to have the ball in his hands quite a bit, both through the air and through his feet. And I think you really have to establish that ground game because you're going to be facing a physical Michigan defense. And Don Brown does a heck of a job, always does. Very uncharacteristic last year of the whiteout when they felt embarrassed, and they took it personal. They still do. You look at Lavert Hill, what he did, the gesture to the student section last year, and really saying a lot of things this week leading up to the game. So they took it personal, there's no doubt. How Penn State will attack them, I think it's got to start really with that ground game. Michigan's secondary is good. The defense could very well be the best in the country. You never, to me, it's that good, and it starts really with Penn State establishing the line of scrimmage, and that includes up front. Got to block, and you have to establish the running game without a doubt.
Jason Lord on with us on the Nittany Lions Sports Report and of the Between the Lions podcast and of 1450 ESPN State College. Jason, tell us a little bit before you go about the work you guys are doing, both at Between the Lions and of course, at the station, kind of with your boots on the ground and working alongside the program.
Well, working alongside the program, obviously, I'm associated with Penn State postgame on ESPN Radio 1450 home games. I'm mainly the guy giving the scores, but the away games, I'm the co-host with Mark Snyder, who hosts both home and away, does a heck of a job without a doubt. And Between the Lines, we go not only with football, we're in depth with Penn State sports. You name it, if it's tied to Penn State sports, we cover it. And really, it's the three people tied to the university. Brian Tripp, the voice of Penn State hockey, does an unbelievable job. And Matt Bortner is the guy that really, the heart and soul, the one who came to us and brought the idea forward of the podcast. And it's grown from there. It's on year 2, and hopefully here's to many more.
Indeed. We are certainly listening ourselves whenever we can. We love the work you guys do. We love supporting other Penn State-related podcasts, so we wish you guys the best of luck with Between the Lions. And we'll be, of course, listening on 1450 on the pregame and postgame. So thanks again for being part of our show this evening and providing some color on the Nittany Lions.
No problem. Thanks for having me, guys. I echo the sentiments. You guys do a heck of a job with this. I always enjoy coming on your show and getting a chance to talk Penn State sports.
It's a pleasure. And enjoy the big game this weekend. Should be fun.
All right, looking forward to it without a doubt. Big road test.
All right, thanks again. That is Jason Lord coming on, and certainly appreciate his time this evening.